apologize, Stuart?
Well, that's the question I wanted to get into. What does it mean to apologize?
You were asking it in a tone that was very suspicious of the entire apologizing enterprise.
Yeah, I think that, like most other things, apologizing can be a beautiful thing, but when apologizing is institutionalized, it starts to suck really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Do you want any coffee?
I'm okay for now.
Okay.
I'll take your tulitiku, though.
I put it by you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think institutionalized apologies, institutionalized apologetics is...
What constitutes an institutionalized apology?
Basically like a kind of cultural constructs about like what kind of people should feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
A cultural consensus about the standards by which one should measure themselves to decide whether they feel bad about things.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I think like a lot of things, an apology is like a deeply human thing. It's a capacity that is, and it can be like very beautiful, just like sex, or just like masculinity, or just like femininity, or like just like hard work, or a sense of justice, or like these are all things that are like very beautiful aspects of the human, and very powerful aspects of the human, and naturally those are the things that institutions seek to monopolize. And it's just interesting to go through the line item list of like what are our human qualities, and what are the ones that have been institutionalized that we don't even realize, and should we continue to let them to be institutionalized? This is just dovetails with my other prompts today about disintermediation broadly, the idea of removing middlemen from things. And there's a couple apologies and in the idea of investment are like the two things I had at the ready to kind of illustrate why we should be suspicious of middlemen.
Yeah, and there's oh, hey Pooch.
Hey puppy.
Hello.
Hello. So we have a complimentary dog this morning. Wow, this is a premium dog. Morning.
Poodaloodle. Hello. Hey. It reminds me of the two dreadlock poodles in town.
Oh yeah, those ones. Have we talked about those ones, or have you seen?
So.
Oh, but I know what you're talking. No, I remember those dogs. Those are like the
celebrities.
That's like basically. Actually, if you were a dog, you'd be one of those dogs.
Me?
You have the same hair.
That'd be me.
You have the same dreads, like the.
Yeah.
And to kind of like sit there with a kind of like regal, like, yes, I am in a bar, two of us. I remember seeing those dogs at the Goose, when the Goose was the actual Goose.
Yeah.
I remember seeing those dogs in there and people just being like they're here. the dogs, and they can sit in the middle of the room and like no one objects.
Yeah.
Like the dogs have just like infinite chill. Just they're not going to be perturbed. And their owners kind of sit around and are like, these are our dogs. It's kind of people we are.
The bureaucracy, the middlemen, the government, it parasitizes human virtues. It is an authentic apology is a human virtue that then gets parasitized by institutions that see an ability to use it to control people. Other things that get parasitized are caring for each other.
Yeah.
And empathizing with each other.
Compassion.
Having compassion is a virtue. a virtue to look up for has left the world population vulnerable to COVID insanity.
Yeah.
And leveraging people's compassion for each other to control us. But apologizing, yeah, it gets really distorted if you basically believe in guilt, in your own guilt, and in humanity's guilt at large. And it gets really distorted, and everything is something to apologize for. But my positive definition of apologizing is it can only be to your own terms. An apology is inappropriate not when you've fucked up someone else's terms of conduct, but when you've defaulted on your values and someone saw you do it and was affected by that, then that's a place where an apology is appropriate.
Yeah.
Because when you say sorry and you actually mean it, you're saying, I did not do my best. I am taking a moment with you as my witness to say that I'm like noticing it, and I'm deciding like the apology should be a decision, a proactive decision to do better from that point. Most often it's this shield thing to just like lubricate a situation and get out of something. And it falls really flat when it's just like a sorry is thrown up to fend off. Like, oh, I know it was wrong. Let's move on to the next thing. I know it was bad. Let's move on.
Yeah, when apologies are deployed proactively, you can be sure that they're not authentic, because they come with a recognition. They should have a recognition of like expanded or at least changed consciousness that gives you a different
changed
perspective.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's necessary there.
Absolutely.
Of like, you can see in the apology from the person that they are adjusting their behavior right then and making a promise to themselves, of which you're just a convenient proxy to like be witness to their promise to themselves to change. And 90% of apologizing like in a conversation is not like registering anything that actually needs to change. It registers just a chronic sense of guilt that you have to like speak the sacrament at regular intervals to ward off the evil spirits of your guilt.
Yeah, I think that being in that default state of apologizing for who you are is kind of like something like being a hostage, where you're just standing there and you're like, hands up, like, okay, don't worry, I'm not going to cause any trouble. Oh, are you going to cause any trouble? No. Look, I don't have any weapons at all. See, it's in the body language. I'm showing you my palms. I'm being unthreatening right now. Like, apologizing for yourself is a way of wanting to appear unthreatening, and it's kind of like being in a hostage situation, where you're saying like, if you try to be yourself, if you are willing to like take some risk on behalf of yourself and other people, that you're gonna potentially incur the wrath of the collective when you do that. And so what happens when you have a culture of apology is the people who grab the spotlight are the people who don't give a fuck at all. And so you get kind of an extreme. It's like like how...
Well, that becomes the only way to move in the social space,
exactly.
is to be this fucking, what do you call it? Some derogatory term that you like tag on Trump or something.
Oh, sure. Well,
you have to have some pathology
I
to even move freely in the space.
There's an ecological analog where the monkeys, they looked at different species of primates that are in different biomes or whatever, regions in the world, and like there's some monkeys that live in the jungle where everything's plentiful, and those are the bonobos, and they have their problems, but really they just kind of just lay around and have sex all day. It's kind of a monkey utopia compared to, well, relative terms, compared to the baboon world. And the baboon world is like these monkeys are some ugly motherfuckers. Mm-hmm. They have big teeth. They will fuck each other up. They spend all their time fighting. Most of them, they don't get to have that much sex at all. They're mainly fighting, and it just sucks.
Can't come over. Too busy tearing my neighbor's limbs off.
Too bad. I'm
sorry, babe.
I'm too bad. Too busy. Just like biting the nuts off this rival male. You're gonna have to wait. I'm sorry. What are you gonna do? I'm sorry. I know you have needs, but what are you gonna do?
I feel like my boyfriend likes biting the nuts off his neighbors more than he likes pleasing me.
But the point is when you're in a point of when you're in a situation of scarcity, situations of scarcity and competition, or not scarcity is not the right word. Deprivation. When you're depriving animals of what they need, they become warlike and things are not as fun. And then I think that's what's going on with like the culture of guilt, is that you're depriving most people who don't have the kind of like big strong-willed ego consciousness of being themselves, and so they just like shrink to the back and go, okay, I'm just gonna hands up, you people, whatever, anyone who's gonna do something, do it. I'm just gonna stand here and be unthreatening. And so it creates the conditions whereby you get you get like Mussolinis and people of that nature who just don't seem to be affected by the guilt force field.
When you're saying sorry, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're saying you've violated a code that you believe in. But practically, most people apologizing aren't even conscious of any particular code. And so they're unconsciously defaulting on the socially approved code. And so someone else tells them they've hurt their feelings or something, and they just go straight to saying sorry without even examining if the person they're apologizing to even speaks their own language of coding, of like values and codes.
Yeah, they do it as a safe default.
But to say sorry to them is saying your code of values is more important than mine here, and I broke them. And that's, by saying sorry, I'm saying like your code of values wins.
In the ideal case.
Not in the ideal case, in the like what's actually being communicated case. In the way in which people who like get canceled because they said something stupid on Twitter 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They apologize for it, and they don't even believe or care or think about any given woke thing that they accidentally crossed the line of. But by saying sorry and apologizing about it, they're saying the woke thing is true, and my thoughts about being a free thinker are not true.
Yeah.
That's what saying the sorry means.
I guess what I mean by the ideal case is that when you're apologizing to someone and recognizing their code of values, you're at least aware of their code of values, and you're not just apologizing with respect to a kind of unspoken, like, this is the kind of socially expected thing that's kind of unexamined. Like, if you said, like, when people, like, and you can see it in the phrase when people say, like, I'm sorry, but... it's an indication that they're about to say something that they think they might violate something. How's it going?
It's just inefficient and inaccurate speech. 95% of apologies are distorting the actual meaning of the communication.
I think apologies are bullshit. I think that a person would be better served by just like changing their behavior and letting people see the actions of it. It's better to apologize after you've done something that, like, apology should be like a recognition that you did something, that you did something different and you want to let people know.
That's the context in which I've made some real apologies this year to people that were close to me.
Yeah.
I was like looking back on the journey that mistake and then correcting it and then being in a new place. and then like the fruit of that whole journey. We're gonna have to wait.
We're gonna have to wait. That's cool. You know, it's a public park.
I need an apology.
How dare you? How's it going?
Excuse us.
What's up, guys? We're doing a podcast live.
We picked an ideal location right in the middle of the trail.
Yeah, the apology in those cases of changing all my behavior first and like reflecting and understanding it, the apology was the like progress report to the person that I wronged.
Yeah.
And like, see, I understood, I saw what I did and I changed it, and
Yeah.
here I am now, and I'm like, the I that made the mistake at the beginning could not have said I'm sorry. I had to
Yeah.
become this new person that actually understands what I did to be able to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's like I think a genuinely accepted apology is like, there's so much grace in that, and it brings people closer, and maybe, well, yeah, it does bring people closer than they were before. Even when someone genuinely accepts an apology, it's like, it's like a strengthening of the bond between those people, because it's like, we ran into this conflict and it didn't break us, and so now it's something that kind of like,
Well-
it like welds a potential fissure in your relationship.
Well, forgiveness and apologizing and forgiveness it's the capability of something being totally broken and weaving it back together.
Yeah, it's a synthesis, it's integration.
It's the power to like go from broken, ripped thing to
Yeah.
back to a new, stronger thing.
Yeah, and that's why I think the idea of a preemptive apology is like a contradiction in terms. It's toxic.
It gets in the way of
does.
actual forgiveness and
does.
actual apologizing, because you're saying it before you've reached understanding and adjustments and correction.
Yeah.
And seeing that by your values you did something less good, and so you changed it. To put a sorry in at the front of that is to like get in front of all these processes that haven't even happened yet, precluding the need to actually do
Yeah.
any of those processes.
Yeah, you want to see a society that is constantly at each other's throats. Well, look for a society where a bunch of people who are constantly preemptively apologizing to each other. It's really hard to get close to someone who's apologizing for who they are, because you don't know how to get close to them. To bring this back to myself, I'm trying to not apologize because I want to be able to get close to people. And so it is a weird thing, you know, because I just want to look at this, because the image of someone who, like, there seems to be this meme that, like, if you are someone who comes in with a really soft, really, 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 like, hesitant approach to revealing yourself as to not offend, you're putting up a lot of walls.
You are,
there,
yeah.
and you're
You're
not
hiding.
really, yeah, you're not doing any favors with that. Yeah, this is something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think there's something to be like, I want to appreciate people who have some kind of boldness and go out on a limb for other people, because that's like a sign of respect to someone, that you're willing to go out on a limb and do something, because you're like, it's like on the recognition that you believe that they're going to take what you're doing with like the kind of faith that if it doesn't work out, it'll be all right.
Yeah, that sensitivity and that hesitance, whatever the intentions of it, it highlights that the person you're approaching, their weakness is the most important thing to take into consideration here.
Yeah, that's what you're focusing on.
Not their possible strength.
That's a good point.
And ability to accept the truth of what you are. You're just highlighting their weakness, or just like calling it before you even meet them that you're too weak to actually see who I am or what I actually think.
Yeah, my follow-up prompt to this, corollary to this, was about preachers. I was trying to think, like, what are preachers in our day and age? Preachers, like old school preachers, are more or less a cultural artifact of sort of prior iterations of this institutionalized virtue. But it seems like the profession of preacher is like someone who makes it their life to act as like a vector of the it's even in theology, it's called like apologetics, like Christian apologetics. It's a profession that is centered around going, okay, but this whole kind of thing, like let's reconcile and like smush what we know is true into, or what needs to be true, into the way things are. It's a very backwards way of getting to the truth, or getting to yourself, for that matter. So I don't want to be too harsh on preachers, but because I understand why people like are led into that path, because it seems like, by making the content something that is about virtue, I'm going to be serving virtue, but you're getting in the way of it, maybe.
Okay, so the good interpretation of preachers is about how information has to be portrayed. Information gets transmitted by individuals, and every piece of information bears the stamp of the individual bringing it to you. And like trying to look at a table of data versus a TED Talk from someone who actually cares about that subject, giving you their story of how they unpacked this table of data. One is much better at transmitting the information than the other. It distorts, or it stamps that information to have it come through that personality, but that's how most information gets. That's how all information gets passed around. I guess there's two ways of getting information: looking at the objective world yourself with your own eyes, your own rational mind, and receiving it from someone else who's done that. So the ideal of a preacher is to take a dead book of dead information, of irrelevant metaphors about being a shepherd when no one even like remembers what being a shepherd or even wears wool anymore. Taking that dead book and caring about it personally and giving personal anecdotes to people about why this book helped you. And now that information is revitalized. So that's a case for a middleman, maybe.
Sure, a communicator.
Yeah. Revitalizing dead information that should not be lost.
Yeah. I think the problem comes where like if you are putting yourself in the position of being a conduit, you are kind of like letting yourself be molded by the expectation of like doing something with the truth that you're entrusted to communicate. And that's what a profession is. It's like I think that there's a kind of almost like there's an entrepreneurial function at work. And I think a lot of some types of societies breed. Some types of societies and some types of religions are more suited to priests, and others are more suited to preachers. And I think a priest and a preacher are a little bit different. Whereas a priest is kind of like almost like a...
A priest has sunken into the dead book himself.
Yeah, a priest is a religious icon. A priest is like a ritual function.
Yeah.
Whereas a preacher is like a business function. I think a preacher's like, I mean, that's why in America, we don't have priests, we have preachers. In much older societies like France, there's priests. There's really not preachers, because there isn't really a market for preachers, because there's the Notre Dame Cathedral. It's right here. You don't need a preacher to tell you about that. You need a priest to sanctify it. Whereas like in America, where it's like, we got a Jack in the Box and a strip mall and a Home Depot.
And a shade tent in the parking lot where this preacher is deciding.
That's a preacher society. And there's something funny about that. It makes me I always go back to this like Mark Twain's riff about how like America is brilliant at producing geniuses and charlatans alike, because there's a market for people to be conduits, because there's not a lot sitting around where, I just think that like seeing as we're talking about America and we're in America and the world is increasingly, it seems like we have to deal with more like this business function of religion more. Like you can see it with COVID stuff. It's just becoming, this is why I meant this morning about how you texted me that picture of like Google's logo where like all the
letters are masked, and all the letters have freshly gotten their booster.
Full bandages on them.
And one of the letters is a doctor with a little heart next to him.
Yeah, a little emoji like, good.
And he's got the table of vaccines next to him that he's just administered to all the cute, colorful, happy little letters.
We're protected against the baddies. Like, brought to you by Google. Yeah, that's...
and some given trucker Trump supporter in Omaha sees it and goes, you know what? Actually, vaccines don't seem that bad anymore. Yeah. I'm convinced.
Look at these cute little letters. Well, if they can get a vaccination, so can I. Calls up his local Walgreens. I'm on my way. I want to do my part. Okay, all right.
We're glad to have you, Pete.
Yeah, Pete.
We were all rooting for you, Pete.
Yeah.
Welcome to the light.
Now that the Omicron wave is over, now's the time I'm going to get my vaccination, so I'll be protected for the next 60 days, marginally until the effectiveness wanes. Gee, I hope there's no side effects. Come on. Dude, I think the narrative is collapsing. And I think it is, man. I think the COVID narrative is falling apart.
The narrative collapsed about 40 days into the fucking thing.
For some people. Well, I don't think the narrative ever got started with a certain part of the population, but I do think there's a kind of...
The trick... Sorry.
No, go for it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The whole trick with the COVID thing was it hit the population at a time of max media fatigue, and no one had the strength or the passion left to follow up leads themselves anymore.
Yeah, we were vulnerable.
And check facts anymore and care about news anymore. It came on the heels of 4 years of excruciating Trump madness type news. Mm-hmm. And so no one has the energy to find out if they should actually get the vaccines or not. It's just easier to get it.
Yeah.
So that you can keep not thinking about the news cycle because you've been battered into oblivion with it for 4 straight years. So just no one has the strength to think outside of their own like jobs and their own livelihood. So that's how a fucking hoax was able to be pulled over people's eyes.
Yeah, I remember a couple days ago, I told Alicia, I was like, yeah, remember when like, isn't that weird? Remember when the news, do you remember a time before the news was about COVID? Before like every story was about COVID? And she said like, yeah, before that it was about Trump. I was like, fuck, you're right. It was like, how many years has it been now? It's been like 7 years that there hasn't been anything unpredictable.
Yep.
Yeah, it's weird. That's like almost like a generation where at some point, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we need like to stop expecting that there's like a source of information or something.
I guess it's representing the calcifying mind of the boomer generation. as their minds get stiffer and stiffer and less able to reckon with the world, their media feed reflects less and less and less nuance and adaptability. Like, that's just an expression of their own inner mental state as they pass into elder years and not being able to, like, think very objectively anymore.
Yeah, it is interesting how the...
Or not caring anymore
Yeah.
to think very critically about the outside world.
It is an interesting observation to see how the media or the mainstream culture, mainstream media narrative is more or less kind of traces the lifetime arc of the boomer generation. Like, that generation really left a stamp on America and really forced a lot of the dynamics of how, it's like, what is the average age of the boomer, like the peak average boomer? Like, how old are they now? Like 70 almost? Something like that? Mm-hmm. So they're getting to the end of their life where the ones who haven't figured out a spiritual way of living are suffering at this point. And there's a lot of those people, and they want to...
The people themselves... take any given older person who has a very narrow view of the world and vulnerable to ideology. It's not much to see there, but the institutions that profit off those populations have turned into these civilization corroding vampire organisms where the health of the 5 to 10-year-old kids is less important than maybe abating the risk of a boomer catching something. We're taking the health away from our kids for a boomer to feel a little more safe.
Yeah.
Morning.
Morning. What's going on, guys?
How you doing?
And again, it's much more the institutions that are doing that just by blind entropy.
Yeah. This is a war on the children. We need to start calling it as such.
Well, it's some sort of war on consciousness itself.
It's a war on youth, a war on vitality,
War on free will.
war on sensuality.
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's just plays into your fear of existence for its fuel. You can get out of it. You can get out of things. You can get out of life itself. Just sign over your life and information to Big Brother, and you can hide away from the world forever. We know it's tough out there. We know it's even tougher than you think. There's scary viruses out there. Like, don't go outside. Don't grow. Don't do anything.
I'm tired. I just can't. Right?
I can't even.
I can't even. Those are the calling cards of this attitude, and those phrases are deployed as a way of apologizing for existing. Going, it's not my fault.
Okay, so you had apologizing / preachers, and then you had investment as a social game, a way to have fun with each other. And both of those lead into your desire to excoriate the middleman from everything.
To disintermediate people's relationships.
Disintermediate isn't violent enough of a term for how people like you actually feel about middlemen.
You know, I don't want to be a zealot. I want to be correct. I think sometimes, like, it's nice to have an accurate word.
I can see a way that I'm a middleman.
Okay.
With all the clothing I'm making, I'm the middleman there.
Yeah.
I know people who love to print shirts. I know people who are super artistic and have no practical hands-on skills to
But Alex,
make it physical.
are you an institution? No, you're an individual. See, middlemen is something that is deeply necessary to the world. In fact, it's part and parcel of the specialization of labor, which is absolutely necessary for our continued survival, and thriving and growth. But it's the nature of the middleman that I think it's the problem. Well, to flip this around and make it actually quite seemingly paradoxical, but really not at all. I think in some sense the ideal case would be that. Morning.
Hello.
Hey.
Puppy. Pig dog.
That white one with the
yeah.
spots is my favorite today.
Yeah, me too.
It's really cute.
It's like a pig dog. It's like a,
Yes,
a big.
it's a very strange, awkward mix of breeds.
Yeah, I know it is. I like it. It's like fat and like yeah.
It's not very shapely, but
No.
it's been
No,
evolved for happiness. Personal happiness.
I think animals that are like fat but have like a tiny little face are kind of cute. Actually, somehow like they're babies or something. Okay, so yeah, the middleman thing. I think. Okay, so from a certain way of looking at it, I suppose what I'm actually saying is that, in some sense, we need way more. Way more middlemen to do a better job of mediating interactions. Except if you ask for more, like ideally, individuals could be middlemen themselves and could I suppose that's what's called making a living, right? Is being a broker of value, being someone who creates value that could not otherwise come into being. But what we have as substitutes, the kind of middlemen we have fewer and fewer middlemen. That's what centralization is. It's the idea that we can't trust doctors. We have to trust the CDC. We can't trust the CDC anymore. We have to trust the World Health Organization. Okay, not them. We have to trust religion. See, it gets further and further and further away from. There's this progression. When you're afraid, there's a progression from many points of view to fewer points of view.
Yeah.
And when you get fewer points of view, those remaining points of view concretize into institutions, which then take on a kind of momentum, which then calcifies things to the extent that they break down. The whole thing falls apart, and then there's new niches created for people who actually communicate effective things. So. Yeah, the middleman thing, I think it does need to be examined, and I think the word disintermediation is really directed at institutions.
It's just too many syllables, bro.
Okay, there's a lot of words though. There's only so many sounds, so we got to have. What would you say? What would you use in place of disintermediation? That's just a crypto word, so that's why I talk about it.
I already went to an emotional, visual, visceral violence phrase statement, call to action with it of excoriate the middleman.
Excoriate is a pretty violent word. Yeah, it's a pretty violent word. Yeah, it's darknesses.
Yeah, the middleman has to be a person that is responsible for his actions and has his signature at the bottom of transactions and is responsible and goes under if he does his job in ill faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can, and we've tried to centralize things to make them more efficient, one-size-fits-all middlemanning process, but it just becomes this blind, entropic, dead corpse parasite thing, like the CDC and the WHO, that can't effectively adapt to reality. And so here we are, like, trying the same thing with blockchain technology of getting less middleman, getting better, more robust middlemanning protocols going that have each of their protocol steps completely transparent and checkable.
I just thought of a great branding strategy. Not middleman, middle million.
Middle million?
We need the middle class of society to take some responsibility for what they're doing.
What are the middle class doing?
Listening. They should be speaking. I think, I guess my specific, about the investment thing, I guess it's occurred to me, so there's like Wall Street, right? There's the SEC, right? Securities and Exchange Commission, which was, put in place, I think, if I have my history correct, it was created in response to the 1929 financial crisis. So there was perceived to be a need for a public institution with government authority to kind of like preemptively rein in speculation, to sort of protect the credit structure of
And then when did the Depression happen?
It was right after 1929. Well, no, it was the SEC it crashed, and then the SEC was formed in response to that. I think that there's arguments to be made about like whether or not all that stuff prolonged the Great Depression, the New Deal, and all that stuff, which I suspect it did, but that's just my bias speaking. I don't really know much about it, to be honest.
Same. In terms of my bias.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that specifically though, we're kind of living in a whole different world now with regard to like what investing is. It isn't the stock market anymore. It's getting a lot more. High amplitude than that. Much more broader in scope. But the specifically like I guess okay. So I'll just back up for a second. So we have the government. It's the government being like having a just role in regulating the activity of value speculation is kind of unexamined, and most people don't really seem to have an objection to the idea that the government has a role in suppressing investment where it's deemed necessary. But I was thinking about that. I kind of want to examine that assumption because I don't know if they do really have a right to do that at this point.
No, they don't.
Because like if you imagine there was a government agency called like the Happiness and Laughter Commission, where like people go, you know what? Oh well, I mean you see it in a lot of totalitarian countries. There's like a Ministry of Culture. They go, this is dangerous art. Like in China, there's Communist China, there's, or I don't know if you call it communist at this point, whatever the fuck China is.
Yes, you fucking can call it communist China.
Late stage, whatever you want to call it. But it's...
it's communism, man. It can't go any other direction but totalitarian.
My only objection of calling it communism is I just wish we had more accurate language to talk about the different manifestations of communism. I think China's a really, really unprecedented situation. There's aspects of it, whatever. I don't want to get from that rabbit trail. I don't disagree with you, but
the only new traits this current version is showing now is by the new
technology
evolution of ingenuity that free nations created for the communist model to parasitize.
Yeah, to sort of expropriate and use to enforce their ideals or whatever. I think that if there was like, most of the like in America, if there was like a Ministry of Culture a ministry of truth, a ministry of a government agency that was tasked with going like, there's these we don't want to show, like effeminate men in media because then it's going to make men not want to work and have families. That's what's going on in China.
In China, yep.
They're banning art because they think that's going to be bad for the economy. Like, okay, that's like a red flag right there, right? That you're assuming the position of going, we know what's best. We're going to preemptively limit ideas that we think are going to be dangerous. We're going to burn books. We're going to put you in prison if you are gay or if you're the wrong kind of Muslim or whatever. But so we from like the West, or at least the people who haven't gone absolutely batshit insane, still look at China and go, that's kind of fucked up, right? And yet we accept that something like the SEC is sitting there going, oh, you can't have this kind of ICO. All these old men and women sitting around in some room in Washington, D.C. are going, blockchain? Oh, that's, no. There's a law from 1929 that says, get the fuck out of here, man. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're assuming the role of this kind of paternalistic body that goes like, okay, so there's this aspect of human relationships. I should probably define this. Investment is like anything where you go, I'm going to give you some of my money, some of my power. I'm going to trust you with it, that you're going to do something with it and pay me back. Okay, on a very simple case, that's what it's the extension of faith and credit to another person.
Yeah.
In what way, from like a human rights perspective, does anyone else have to get in the way, get in between, to weasel their way in between and going, you're not allowed to have faith in this person. You're not allowed to put your money where your mouth is. Like, we don't let people do that with relationships, except for like pedophilia or something. But like in terms of adult relationships, we don't allow people to go like, oh, that person's bad for you. No, that guy's an asshole. You're just a naive lady. This guy's going to take advantage of you. The government's going to step in and say no, right? We don't do that because that would be like really it'd just be fucked up, right? Do you want to live in a world where like there's like you have to like apply for like a relationship permit? What the fuck? That's
China.
That's fucked. Yeah, no, exactly, right. So that's fucked up, right? So I think that it's just when you properly, all this crypto stuff is making me, it's just becoming so much more decentralized and so much more like high res that it's making me think that like it's becoming obvious that the government, or let's say not the government, but any other people getting in the way of other people trusting each other with money is kind of uncomfortably inconsistent with what I think of as like human rights, like the freedom of speech.
Yeah,
I think there should be like an amendment like the freedom of credit, the freedom of exchange. There needs to be like some commerce.
It does
rights.
have to be positively stated.
Mm-hmm.
A positive statement of the freedom of trade and the freedom of commerce. It can't be implicit anymore.
No.
Because to have it be assumed it's not enough to ensure freedom.
Right.
And the fact of these middleman regulatory agencies being compulsory is the red flag. If it was the government providing a service
Sure.
that you could voluntarily
Arbitration or something like that.
That you could voluntarily pay the government to be an arbiter for a given trade deal that you're not sure about. So you want to pay for a service, and then depending on how well the government arbitrates that, you can decide for yourself if you want to keep using that service or not.
Yes, like example,
That's great,
like contract,
potentially.
like a referee function, where like if you're in a business and you want to have a contract with another business, you want to sort of invoke some kind of regulatory authority to make sure that the contract is actually enforceable. And if it's voluntary,
But if it's compulsory,
right.
there's no incentive for the government to do that job well.
Right.
Because if they do it bad, if they do it good, it's compulsory. You have to pay us to be the middleman in either case. So
Yeah.
why would we get better at this? It's hard to get better.
Yeah, I think that there's a tension between, and I'm looking at wokeism here. There's a tension between idealizing consent and consensuality and, is that a word? I don't know. Let's just say, like the idea of like consensual activity is okay on one hand, but also paternalism is good. There is a real tension between those two things, because the body or the person or the consensus about what is okay and what is kind of like enforced by some group of people somewhere on everyone else is distinctly non-consensual. It's distinctly, it's very like, it's like assuming what's good for you and assuming what's bad for you. And it is just ultimately not very humanistic. It's kind of like pulling the e-brake on the cultural evolution of the world. It's trying to stop human culture from changing, which is kind of like a recipe for suicide.
Yep. Yeah,
My hot take. That's actually not that hot take. I've thought about it a little bit.
I'm in a state of total investment of all my resources, mostly into myself. Any extra revenue I get, I immediately reinvest it back into myself and into my relationships, and each new each new investment in any given of my relationships is a new like test, is a new like stress test on that relationship.
Yeah.
Like my I guess I'm going around like investment as a social like game. All my relationships are, my portfolio is my friends.
Yeah.
And I see my like friend relationships economically, and I see the ideal of like a maximally profitable relationship down the road, and I just invest like a little bit more in the present moment, just a little bit more than before, based on what like the relationship can handle, and like a stable portfolio of I'm just rambling here.
No, I get what you're saying.
But I'm not like saying it very well nor with a point to get to with it. But like even when all my given projects start turning real profits, I'll still be seeking to reinvest 90% of those profits back into the thing, if only to get out of taxes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's not even a bad that's not even a, like, that was recognized by the people who designed the tax code originally. The idea that investment capital wasn't taxed as much was done explicitly to make capital useful, so that it would incentivize the allocation of capital, incentivize risk-taking with capital.
Yeah, to encourage you to use that money.
Right.
And that is a good principle.
It's a good principle.
The blood of a nation must flow for the nation to live. And so money must actively go to places.
Yeah, because money is only useful when it's used.
Yes, that's
it's
right.
It's not, if it just sits there.
If it sits there,
right.
It can't grow.
Yeah.
The thing that makes money grow into more money is movement of that money.
Yeah, which is, are you aware, and this is maybe getting into something that's like kind of technical and not that interesting, but it's somewhat relevant to this. Are you aware of this recent push among some people, some political factions, to to make it possible to tax unrealized capital gains. There's this idea that if you own stock in something, right? Because right now the way it works is that if you own stock, you just get taxed when you sell it and you cash it out. But there's this push to go, because of all the recent inflation in asset prices, the government wants to get more tax revenue by going, okay, if you did sell your stock, this is how much money you'd make, so we're going to tax you on the hypothetical. And it's like, wow, if there was really seriously one way to just push the delete button on economic prosperity, that's how you would do it. Is you would say, oh, you're saving up money so you can do something? No. Mm-hmm. Like, do you want to just dam the river? Like okay, you if you're gonna do that, you might as well go full communism, because at least would be more honest.
Yeah.
That kind of half measure would be literally worse than any other possible approach, I think. Which I don't think it's even done in good faith. I think it's disingenuous. I think what it is it's like a way to try to get like a gatekeeping function. It's trying to assume even more of a gatekeeping role with investment, to where like, unless you jump through the right political hoops, we're not going to even let you get in the position of having money.
Yeah.
It's like preemptively eliminate try to preempt capital accumulations is a very I think it's a very short-sighted policy, and I'd have to finish this. I think where that comes from is it's the wrong solution because people look at capital accumulation, they look at inequality, and they go. So what's really going on is that the government's failure to function correctly and provide basic services is being blamed on people who accumulate capital and do something useful. And you saw that play out in spades with that whole the Elon Musk Elizabeth Warren spat thing, where it's like, you're the problem because you have money, not I'm the problem because I have all this money and did nothing with it.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, let me take something from you, waste it, and then blame you for not giving me more. That's, I don't know. It's a little telling. It's a little suspicious when you look at it that way. It's I don't want to be like a preacher of capitalism. I just want to point out that we don't even know what capitalism is. No one knows what they mean when they say that word. It's something like you have to get into what the dynamics. You have to understand that money is like physics, and it flows and it behaves according to thermodynamic. It's like everything else in nature. It's something you can't apply an ideology. Like, an ideology is not a strategy. It really isn't. An ideology is in some sense an admission of defeat, because it's going, we don't know what's true, so we're gonna and we can't reveal that we don't know, so we're gonna blame something.
Yeah, I have thoughts lately about value itself as I try and leverage more and more of my hours of wakefulness to produce more and more value. I get to questions of what is value and what is valuable, who's it valuable to, who's the one person that's capable of assessing value in me. That's me. And so thinking about how to produce more value takes me to questions of where is the value in this moment? And just breathing is bringing more value into your system, and just focusing on your breath is a pleasurable, healthy thing of, there's free value to be harvested in this present moment.
I don't know. I that's so, for some reason that sounds so funny to talk about to use words like that to talk about this kind of hippie shit. You know what I mean?
Well, money is value.
Yeah.
What is value? It's something that helps you do what?
Right.
So what's important to you? What's the first most important thing? That's living. So what's like the prime value? It's
I just think it's funny
breathing.
how it's so emblematic of our current cultural moment that like we have this like weird like there's a weird resonance between like the kind of like hippie type breath things and like investing. It shows you like where like youth culture is heading.
Well,
It's very interesting.
re-examining the whole thing from first causes,
Yeah,
and
we
that's what
have
I'm
to.
trying to do. Like, how do I make more money? Well, what is money? It's value. Well, what is value? What's like the first value that I can reach right now? And then that gives you answers like mindfulness and being in this present moment, and with a zeitgeist of this podcast we're cultivating is how do we make this profitable? We start by zeroing in on who it's profitable to first, which is the two of us, and making it a basically valuable thing from the center, and allowing it to grow according to organic principles, and just setting up a positive sum game in the microcosm, and letting it attract other positive sum games around it at an organic rate.
Yeah, there's something about things that begin in a small scale and begin in limited context that like the process of design is always done. You don't like, what do you do when you have an idea? Well, you get a notebook and you sketch it out.
Yeah.
You have to have a vision. You have to have a consistent seed.
And this theme is where I don't have much credence to, or I don't spend much time thinking about how disenfranchised our generation is. Like, I don't really care about narratives of how badly we've been fucked by older generations than us, or how like oppressed we are. Like, I have a little bit of money, and I have a little bit of ability to make money, and there's so much to be done with just learning how to allocate and reinvest and plant that little bit of free energy there. There's so much to be learned in the microcosm. And it's something about like building your house on solid foundations. I'm starting to ramble again.
I feel like I don't think I'm unwilling to adopt the perspective that our generation is oppressed. I think that we could look at it that way, certainly. And our generation, I think, is deprived in some sense, but I don't know if we're being oppressed. I think it's kind of like we're deprived in the sense that we have a bit of a blank slate, but I wouldn't really want it any other way. I think things could be a lot better in the future, and we might be really surprised at what kind of Renaissance takes hold.
I guess the answer to the oppression we're experiencing right now is in the vital action that's available to you around you right now. Like, shut up and get to work.
Yeah.
Like, there's valuable work to be done right now that's going to shift the needle in huge ways 10 years from now.
Yeah.
If you just learn about how to develop real trust between you and the people around you, how to make money in more and more stable ways that are more and more objectively good for everything around you.
Yeah.
the small things right here, right now, are how we change the world down the line from here.
Yeah, we have a lot of freedom. We have a tremendous amount of freedom.
We have exactly as much freedom as we deserve. And you get more of it by proving that you can handle your present amount of freedom responsibly.
You have as much freedom as you're willing to admit, as you're willing to look at and deal with. When I was up here with Alicia a few nights ago, we were looking. I mentioned we were tripping on shrooms, and we had this conversation. We realized like we have so much fucking freedom. Like we're so fucking free, you know. We are just like free. We're like Like it's crazy how free we are. That's and it was a really beautiful thing to realize that like you're limiting. Or, you know, there's definitely some, like, right, if I tried to cross an international border right now, I'd be fucked. So that's definitely a curb on my freedom. But that's not the limiting factor. I haven't tried to do that recently. Hey, puppy.
Hey, guys.
How's it going?
Hey.
Sorry to interrupt.
No worries.
Come on, guys. Come on, Selma. Come on. Come on. Selma, come.
That man shouldn't have apologized. How dare he?
This podcast is a dog review, Upper Park dog review.
We need to have like a year in dogs. Let's go back and look at all the dogs that have blithely interloped into our...
Those two are okay. The poodle was a great one. The black poodle and the weird fat piggy small head.
I think the fat pig dog is still my favorite.
Yeah, he's the best so far today.
Yeah.
Those two are cute, but too strictly bred to have much personality.
Totally. Strictly. They're domesticated. They're domesticated animals. I was over at a friend's house last night. We were watching Wrist Cutters.
Yeah.
They had a cat. I was looking at this cat, and I was noticing the patterns on the cat, and it was like a calico mixed cat or whatever. But the rest of I think they said it was like a tortoise pattern. I don't know, but like it had like the kind of patterning that was like a feral wild type cat almost, where it was like this chaotic mix of brown and black, and then you know kind of asymmetrical, like kind of like how actual camouflage is supposed to work, you know, like instead of like the like boutique like coloring patterns that humans have favored. I think that like maybe in some ways our generation's personality types are getting more feralized, wild type, some of us, where we're kind of this weird paradoxical blending of like capitalism and hippie shit and like kind of a lot of other things that are a lot harder to put your finger on of like what it is, but you know, and a lot of just weird internet culture, it's very ecological.
Yeah, there's a heavy mutant strain via the internet culture. Yeah. And it's in a process of getting re-stamped with conformism.
It's the conformism's last stand.
Like the YouTube vlogger is this very...
Hey guys!
it's this very cookie cutter thing that you can like really trace the exact like categorical influences on a given vlogger, like what mix of cliches they've put together. And that's just the institution of YouTube stamping conformism over a previously mutant strain of internet personality. And so the actual mutantism is back incubating again in more private chat rooms of the internet.
Yeah, I've been seeing
getting weird all over again.
I've been seeing a lot more like when people link to stuff. I've been seeing a lot more like Mastodon links, Odyssey links, a lot more mainstream adoption of decentralized platforms, which simultaneously warms my heart and also makes me wince every time I see that, because I'm like, satellite, come on.
No, it's fine.
It's fine. There's a huge
co-
market. It's going.
It's a constant blooming and
Yeah.
rotting back to the ground
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
That there's always a new wave coming to bootstrap yourself onto.
There always is.